Greetings. Greetings, everyone. It's always so fun to see who's in the waiting room, and I see so many of our favorite familiar names, maybe a couple new ones. Sometimes I don't get to scroll all the way through, so welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm going to talk a little slowly because we are in the process of welcoming folks into the gathering space. We are super excited for this. We cannot believe it is already our last gathering for Poetry Month. We will do plenty of gatherings in the future. I will tell you more about that at the end, some of our upcoming events. But we're just so grateful for all of you joining us this month. And we're also quite grateful to, first of all, the not even behind the scenes support of Ro Schnoor, who so beautifully communicates, manages, helps us all come together in this space. So thank you so much, Ro. We're also so grateful for the partnerships that have made these gatherings possible. So our incubation partner, the On Being Project, has just elevated our time together. And the On Being Project just has this magic dust of making things feel cohesive. So we're so grateful for Eddie and the team at On Being. We're also so grateful for our team at Wordplay. We have Spring and Amy here, our team from The Hive. I'm not sure who I'm seeing here from The Hive, and also the gorgeous Mercantile Library. So, and we're also grateful for On Being for supporting live closed captioning. And so if you need closed captioning and you want it to be live, you just click on the live transcript below and you'll get closed captioning. So the way this works is that we start with a meditation. Today, I will be delivering the mindful invitation. I will turn it over to the wonderful, wonderful poet and fellow Cincinnatian for as long as he'll have us, Manuel Iris, who will read his poem in both English and Spanish, and we'll talk about the poem and then prompt us for a writing. After we write, we'll share, we'll talk about how that works, and at the end, we'll listen to the poem again, and we'll talk about next steps for our book and our time together coming up. So I think that about covers it. So one thing I wanted to say before I drop into my meditative offering is that I have two little dogs. And there have been multiple times during the pandemic where deep, deep in the guided meditation, a delivery happens or something happens and my dogs bark like crazy. So if that happens, let's all pretend in advance that it is a moment in case you got a little sleepy, it's just to wake us back up to the moment. So that was my dog warning. So before we hunker down into the mindfulness meditation, you might have already done this, but just click and look, click and look. And when you're seeing someone who's a friend, wave at them. No one will know exactly who you're waving at, but maybe your intention will make it clear exactly who you're waving at, who you're so delighted to see. And you can supplement in your chat who you're really happy to see. I'm happy to see so many of you, beautiful humans from so many parts of the world. A miracle, this Zoom. as tedious as it has been sometimes in 2 years, and I am also tired of seeing myself every single day in the Zoom lens, we would not be here celebrating poetry and each other without this vehicle. So let's begin to settle in. But before we go inward, let's take a second to recontextualize what we even see around us. So by orienting, moving your head and neck, start looking at the things in your environment as though seeing them anew. If you're in a familiar space, it's likely that some of the things you place there very purposefully. So just delight, in viewing and smiling and seeing what is around you, but also delight in the lost art of moving the head and the neck and the eyes to look around. Sometimes we're just so deep in our phone for navigation, we really forget that what it feels like to move the spine, move the neck, move the eye. And then do a few wiggles. Wiggle the fingers, the wrists, the toes, the shoulders, the neck, the jaw, make some faces. 3 p.m. here in Eastern Standard Time. So, there's a lot of maybe stuckness that got jammed up in seated business meetings. And now we'll begin to go inward. So I like to place my hands on my lap or on the desk or table and pick a comfortable position. If you know a mudra, you can do that. I like the palms open, the offering, the receiving, receptacle mode. I also like to put my feet on the floor to just remind me of ground. So begin to become aware that you are a breathing being in a place, in a moment. Feel gravity. Let your skin and muscles sink a little. Just let gravity pull everything down, but not in a weighted, despairing way. Just a slight exhale, settling. You might want to put a tiny little smile at the corner of your mouth. Amy Tuttle and I did a dance workshop last night together, and they talked about privileging pleasure. So, what does it feel like if you embody in this moment pleasure? Become aware of the miracle of your breath. The miracle of your beating heart. I find if I pause between breaths, between inhale and exhale, between exhale and inhale, I can often find pulse, heartbeat. The privilege of pleasure, the miracle of breath, of pulse, of sitting together when none of us, except for maybe Amy and Spring and Sarah and Stephen, are in the same room as one another. I love anatomy, and I was privileged to be at a medical school with an anatomist and learned something about the heart that I want to share. At the sort of back base of the heart is a tiny little, um, it looks like a little piece of cartilage, like a valve that has shut. So I was asking about what that was. And the anatomist explained that when a baby is in utero, that valve is open and it is essentially, sharing heartbeat, breath. It is a tether to the mother. I was curious what happens. How does it know to untether, to not be an open portal? And the way it works is that when the baby is born, we hope that that healthy baby, the first thing it does is let out a cry. It is the crying, it is the filling of the lungs that closes that little opening so that that child then has agency over breath and heartbeat. And I said something like, "That's crazy." And he said, "Well, my fellow physicians probably wouldn't agree with me, but I think that's God. It is a miracle to be here with you all, celebrating breath, our own heartbeat, feeling into the collective heartbeat that we express through poetry and our love for poetry and each other. So let's get ready to listen, to learn, and to write. Let's go ahead and rub our palms together. Make some warmth, and then perhaps take them to your face. I like to give myself a little face massage to come back into the room. And we're going to turn our time over to Manuel, who we are so delighted to have here. We've learned from Manuel, and some of you poets may already know this, poet lovers, that Poetry Month is a very busy month for poets. So we're very lucky to have Manuel here. Manuel?
Hello, everybody. I enjoy a lot this first meditation that is part of all of the mindful poetry gatherings, because usually poetry gatherings have other demeanors. People talk, they present the poems, but there is no silencing before. That silencing I only know here in Cincinnati, and I see that it's consistently done in Women Writing for a Change and in mindful poetry moments. And I really, really, really enjoy that, because I think that that is the way to access a poem. I think that a poem is some sort of, I was reading a beautiful definition that Joy Harjo made of a poem. She said that every poem is a house for spirits. Um, I believe that a poem is, every poem is a prayer. Um, and every poem is some sort of a temple. And when you're gonna walk into a temple, in certain cultures you cover your head. In others, you take your shoes off. In others, you just quiet yourself. But either way, you just don't walk into the poem as if you were walking into any other form of language. And the silencing is important because it allows to to perceive things. Stacy started saying, look around as if things were anew. And that is important because that is what poetry does. Sometimes the poet is making up the poem. Sometimes it's just receiving the gift and living the testimony of it. I do believe that the poem is like a form of prayer where you quiet yourself, you receive a gift, and then you leave testimony. And the testimony is the poem itself. The poem is the memory that you were able to foresee transcendence. And transcendence left these trace behind, which is the poem. And it's a responsibility to be able to perceive it and to leave it there. And this is the perfect segue for this poem that Stacy preluded so well when she repeated the word miracle so many times, in the miracle of breath and the miracle of our heartbeat, and etc. These everyday miracles that they are still miracles even if they happen every day. I honestly believe that when we ask for miracles to any deity, is because we're not paying attention, because they are constantly happening around us. It's just that the magic is so everyday that we get used to it. The poem is called precisely Miracle. And I have to confess, this is a Cincinnati poem. It's not only written in Cincinnati, but it is about an actual story. This scene I saw while I lived in Clifton, particularly in Ludlow Avenue. And I was mesmerized, as I am today, every time I see a magnolia tree. Miracle. I'm going to read the poem in English and then in Spanish, which is the original. Miracle. Tribute to Gaston Vaquero. Very close to my house is an enormous magnolia tree. Quiet old child from which, at the end of the winter, bloom beautiful piano arpeggios. Ignore for weeks the melody of the petals ends falling to the silence of the ground. No one hears the miracle except the quiet blind woman who lives in that house and who doesn't know if in her yard each spring a magnolia blooms or a piano falls in love. Milagro. Homenaje para Gastón Vaquero. Muy cerca de mi casa hay un enorme magnolio, tranquilo anciano infantil del cual florecen al final del invierno hermosos arpegios de piano. Ignorada por semanas, la melodía de los pétalos termina por caer al silencio del piso. Nadie escucha el milagro, excepto la callada mujer ciega que vive en esa casa y que no sabe si en su patio cada primavera florece un magnolio o se enamora un piano. As I was telling you, sometimes the job of the poet is to just register the poetry that already happened outside of the page. Sometimes the job of the poet is to keep that image forever. Sometimes we're encapsulating time. There are other kinds of poems. Sometimes poems are an epiphany. Sometimes the poem surprises us with something that we didn't see. And sometimes it's reality who surprises us with the epiphany. And we have the responsibility, I feel, as poets, of putting that into the page so that wisdom, so that music, so that image does not fade away into oblivion. I do think that it's a responsibility, an obligation when those beautiful things happen to leave testimony that they happen. And that is what happened with this poem. I lived very close to a house. It was around the corner of a house that had a beautiful, beautiful, very tall, very old magnolia tree. And I am mesmerized by magnolia trees because they are gorgeous, but they are only gorgeous for like 3 weeks a year. But they are so beautiful that it's worth all the wait for next year to see that magnolia. And I saw this woman that watered this magnolia throughout the year. She went out to her backyard and watered this magnolia. And I could see her always from afar. And I thought that it was very beautiful that she would take care of this magnolia tree that only lasted 3 weeks with flowers. And then I looked closer and I realized that this woman was deaf, was blind. So she would not see those flowers even for those 3 weeks, but still loved the magnolia. She still had this relationship, maybe based on memory, maybe based on fantasy, maybe based on smell. She clearly enjoyed this tree as much or even more than I did. And her relationship with this tree, to me, was nothing less than magic, nothing less than a miracle. And I felt the responsibility of putting down that story. Of course, when writing the poem, I started listening while writing to music. I thought that it was maybe the sound of the wind. It was maybe the sound of the flowers when they fall. It was maybe something else, some other sense that I cannot comprehend what was there. And then is when the piano came up. I was not planning to put a piano in the middle of this poem, but it showed up while I was writing, because that is what happens sometimes when we're writing things. And I believe that this poem is a poem that helps us to slow down and to see the everyday magic that is happening around us, the everyday miracle. I am right now in the constant presence of a person that is in constant awe, which is my daughter is now 4 years old, and everything is new and everything is amazing for her. And when I see her in awe, when she looked, we had a conversation about a magnolia tree actually last week. A magnolia tree of another neighbor bloomed, and she called me out and said, "Papa, Papa, Papa, come here. Look at that. Look at the neighbor's tree. Look at the flowers." And I say, "Yes." And she told me, "They're beautiful, right?" And I said, "Yes, they're beautiful." And I told her, "They're called magnolias." And she said, "Wow." And I asked, "Do you like them?" And she surprised me with her surprise, because she with her reply, because she replied, "I like their name." So this little human being cares about words and about like she liked the flowers, but she really liked the name of the flowers. And the flowers and the child and the surprise by the sound of words are going to keep happening today and are going to keep happening tomorrow. And not because they happen every day, they stop being a miracle. Like birth, like love, like faith, like understanding suddenly something, like the silence that there is before going to sleep, like the first smell or sound when we wake up. All of that, not because it happens every day, we should get used to not call it magic, because that is, I believe that we are surrounded by miracles if we pay attention. And I also believe that poetry helps us to see those miracles. Um, the Russian formalists had a really academic term for this. They called it the automatization. They said that we have an automatic idea of things. When we say the word chair, we think about a chair because chairs are, we are used to them. But when we find the chair in the poem, it is the first time that we see that chair. When we see a tree in the poem, it is the first time that we see that tree. And that tree is happening for the first time to us every time that we read it. So we are not having this automatic image anymore. Poetry is helping us precisely to slow down. We need to slow down and to realize and love these miracles. I believe that poetry is an act of love, and love is never in a rush. Love is never in a rush. Poetry needs us to slow down. This poem is a poem of contemplation. Gaston Vaquero, who is the Cuban poet that I dedicate this poem to, is a Catholic poet that is constantly writing prayers and is constantly making stories that sound somehow magical, which are the result of just paying attention to something. I think that it is the work of the poet, and it is the power of poetry to make every human a child again. We go back to that moment, which was the first moment of humankind, where things didn't have names and we have to invent names for them. We go to that first moment of humankind when we didn't understand reality and we invented gods and we invented realities and we invented cosmogonies and we invented the reasons for the universe. Every child is the beginning of humanity, and every beginning of humanity is the beginning of our mythologies. When we see a kid that sees a flower and doesn't know its name, when we see a kid that sees rain and does not know the explanation, we are attending again the beginning of a humankind. We're attending again the reason why religion exists, the reason why science exists, the reason why mythology exists, and of course, the reason that poetry will never fade away. It does not matter that we are in the year 3024 and we have flying cars. Poetry, gathering around words, will still be a thing. Look, we are always the beginning of humanity. There is this beautiful verse by Paul Valéry, the French poet, in the Marine Cemetery, where he says, the sea is always starting again. La mer, toujours a recommencer. And that is how humanity is always beginning again. We are always starting. And that is why there is always hope. Because we are starting again all the time. We need to slow down and to see the miracles around us. So the writing prompt that I want to give you is a little unorthodox because usually a writing prompt is a verse, but I'm gonna give you some sort of first verse, maybe the title, which is I remember the miracle. And I want you to think about something that happened at some point in your life, every day, something that maybe everybody saw. You see how the kids like to hide in plain sight things? Have you played that game? Hiding something in plain sight? That's how these miracles are. Think about something. If when you were a kid, you look at ants walking up your wall with leaves, if when you were older than that, you remember going out with your friends and looking at the moon, if you see everyday deer in your backyard, if you have seen a little bunny in the mornings when you go out, if you've seen somebody really touched by something that everybody let pass, tell me that story and tell me why it's a miracle. It's just that we didn't see it. Tell
All
me
right.
which miracle you remember.
I will set our timer for 10 minutes and then we'll come back and we'll hear some of the beauty of your miracle. Got about a minute and a half, just so you know. All right, friends. So if you could bring yourself to the end of your line or stanza, or interrupt your poem making so that we can hear some of the beauty, some of the miracles from our group. And as usual, we will invite you to just raise your hand using the reaction button. So it looks like Eric has put his hand up. Eric, we'll let you go first. And then if you could also help us out, thank you, Eric, by using the icon under the reactions that says raise hand. And then Manuel will call on everyone. So Manuel, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hello. Well, I hope that this was a good exercise of memory. I'm going to ask you to write your name in the chat so I can follow that list and call you.
Okay.
So that would make.
So Eric, Nina, Sarah and Stephen, Wade, Raina, if you could also just put your name in the chat.
Yeah, just write your name.
We have a double list.
So I can follow that. One thing that we learned, I guess, from this exercise is that life is a writing prompt. We're constantly looking for writing prompts, but if we pay attention, we are surrounded by them. When we don't know what to talk about, we just need to pay attention. And sometimes I receive a beautiful message while you guys were writing. And sometimes when we have writer's block, we can just tell something that is already poetry in itself. And telling that story will help us unlock, Well, can we start with Sarah? I know that you say you were in first, Sarah, but we can try.
Thank you. I'm so glad you're here, Manuel. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
This one's called Neighborhood. If you open the door to our apartment, walk down the dark staircase and turn right, you will find the door to the apartment of Miss Frankie. Yesterday, on my way to the laundry room, I find Miss Frankie's dog, blind and constipated, quivering on the sidewalk at her door. Alarmed, I call out to Miss Frankie, knock at her door. No response. I follow her dog to the main courtyard. Miss Wanda yells down a hello from her porch. That Frankie's dog? Kim from across the way pokes her head out. That's Miss Frankie's dog. The super's daughter pops her head out. Miss Frankie, okay? I'm here wrapped in a towel, so I can't come out yet. More calling out to Miss Frankie through her screen door, more banging on her screen door. Eventually, Miss Frankie appears, nibbling on nuts she holds in the cup of her hand. Oh, hi there. I'm just getting ready to take him for a walk, just having a little snack. Miss Wanda waves again, welcomes her visitor in. Kim texts her gladness that Miss Frankie has been located. The super's daughter retreats into her morning ablutions. I continue on to the laundry room. Thank you.
What a beautiful community. You know, and that is a miracle right now, especially. Eric, will you please read your poem for us?
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Because I can't hear you.
Oh, you cannot hear me now, Eric?
You can hear me, I can't hear you.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you. Yes.
All right, okay. Well, I don't know everyone's age there, but this might date people's age or culture, but this was about hockey. I'm from Minnesota and hockey is our sport here. And so I remember back to hockey when I was young, and this happened in the 6th grade. So the title of the book, or people would know, it was called Miracles on Ice. And this is my narrative. I said, the USA men's hockey team wins the gold medal in ice hockey at the 1980 Winter Olympics in Lake Placid, New York. They pulled an unforgettable upset of the Russian hockey team. I remember Micah Ruzioni out of Boston College shooting a wrist shot past the Soviet goalie to cinch the victory. I listened to the game on the radio because it wasn't live on TV. My heart and mind were enthralled in the action. The USA team was made up of college kids handpicked by our Minnesota coach, Herb Brooks, and they triumphantly beat a team of professionals from the Soviet Union, a monumental upset and a glorious gold medal. I was in the 6th grade and walked into my classroom and wrote the statement on the blackboard, USA wins the gold medal, because I was proud of them being a youth hockey player myself.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Eric. That's a great story too. Is there a movie about it? Because there should be a movie about it. Nina, you read us your poem first, please.
Yeah. The aroma from the tulips was so strong it needed a whole nose to delve into the petals. And with the deepest breath, my 3-year-old nephew closed his eyes and inhaled the richness of the first spring he might remember, drew from the intoxicating magic of nature, connected himself to the world. He knew he was different from flowers, and yet this small act proved he also knew at heart he was nature. He lingered there. Maybe the grassy green of apple confused him. What did he expect red to smell like? Perhaps he was savoring the spice and wondering if flowers were edible. He didn't know fragrance until this day. And now we have 3-year-old tulips which keep rebirthing themselves in buckets from discarded planters. They bloom to remind me of this moment with a child in his parents' garden. Thank you.
Beautiful. And it's beautiful how these kind of plants remind us of rebirth, right? How perennials are there to remind us that things are cyclical. I am not a great gardener myself, but my wife is. And I see how she selects plants that will come back by themselves next year. And I love expecting it, especially now that it's spring and they are coming back. We have tulips too. Thank you, Nina. Wade.
All right.
No.
I remember the miracle. It was 1989, 7:57 at the intersection under the dark fir trees. The pickup truck knew it could make the light and did. The lumber in the bed did not. It lay in a jumbled mess, blocking traffic in every direction. And then it happened. The moms simply materialized out of the station wagons, the Buicks with the bench seats, the Pontiacs riding low. These moms went into action, whisked the not inconsiderable pile of wood back into the truck, and just disappeared into the mist. I stood in stunned silence, waiting for the bus. It was 7:58 at the intersection under the fir trees. You could hear a raindrop. It was as if nothing at all had happened, and I knew I was a mere pretender.
Well, when a mom goes to action, that's it. Game over. Like nobody's gonna stop that force of nature. I've seen it happening with my wife, and I was lucky enough to be the mom, to be the son of one of those moms. There is a beautiful verse by Cesar Vallejo, a Peruvian poet. He said, "And my mother puts on my poncho, not because it's going to rain, but for it to start to rain." You know, it's gorgeous. Reina, will you please read us your poem?
Hi. This is so good. Wade had me all messed up there for a second. I'm like, oh my God. So many good lines. Okay. Let's see if I can read what I wrote here. I remember the miracle of his knotty fingers pressing piano keys in perfect tune with his voice, mashing later for what seemed an eternity. The rice for the last pudding he would ever make for me. Such care mashing the rice for a pudding. Up close, his gnarled knuckles in plain view held the fork tenderly, shaking, tremoring, and pressing, as if to say, I give you my goodbye and my love offering with each grain, granddaughter. Thank you.
Thank you, Reina. Thank you for that beautiful poem. Love is a miracle, and it's happening all the time, right? Because all I hear and I feel in that beautiful poem of Reina is love everywhere. You know, thank you, Reina. I think we do have time to hear you, Elena. Por favor.
Gracias, Manuel. I feel very emotional listening to everybody, but here we go. I remember the miracle of my mother's face, watching the crucifixion scene in Ben-Hur. I was 3. The blue rain on the screen reflected on her face, mingling with her tears. I could not define that moment then, but I am 66 now, and I remember it as if it happened yesterday. The humanity of my mother's face saved me, surviving all those years without her. Sometimes I see her in the mirror. Now my tears unite with hers, proof she never left me. Sorry. Thank you.
Elena, thank you for your generosity. Thank you for the generosity of your time and your vulnerability. And thank you for letting us in to you and to the beautiful presence of your mom in you. It is a beautiful thing when we see the people that we love in us. Right? I think we have 4 minutes. Isabella, would you close this for us?
Okay, now it's working. Thank you for the prompt and for the poem and for being here. I remember the miracle. I remember entering the garden and being hit by this scent that is true beauty. I remember the color of those of that dominated the garden, green, such a fresh green that evaporates, and this unique scent that reminds me of pine trees mixed with a further odor. I remember looking into the gate of this tree architecture that was designed for these trees, following a Baroque garden tradition. I remember standing at a crossroad of options to choose from. I remember turning around and experiencing myself as the center of the world, my own unique world. I remember the glory of this garden despite the cold, despite the fogginess of the day, and because of its emptiness. Imagine this garden as a resource for electricity, for nourishment, for its beauty, for its shelter for animals, and human beings. Imagine this place in 2050 and draw the future into this land. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella. I have to say that this exercise is an exercise that leads naturally to Thanksgiving. It's an exercise that naturally leaves us to almost literally count our blessings, because we think about those miracles and we think about those beautiful things that happened. So it is a space for high and wonderful vulnerability. But it is that vulnerability that is filled with love and filled with company and filled with light. And I believe that making those spaces of silence to fill with light and love is precisely what the work of the poet is. Ellen, I am very sorry. We're 3:59, and I know that Stacy's looking at me. You can, if you want, you can post the poem in the chat for us to read. But I have to say thank you to all of you for letting me make you company today and talk about poetry. And more importantly, I want to thank you for letting me get into your space, into your silence, into your words, into those memories. Thank you for sharing and for making me part of that. Thank you.
Well, we are so grateful, Manuel. You are a gift, such a gift. And this was a beautiful way to close our gatherings this month with the miracle of poetry and light and creativity and humanity and vulnerability. So a couple of things. For those of you, Francine and a few others who did not, and Kathleen, who didn't get to read today, just a reminder, you'll receive an email pretty soon from Ro, and we will ask for, if you want to share your poem from today on the blog post that we'll do. We'll have the recording of this and a place to commemorate it and for you to share it. Even more exciting is that within a week or so, you'll be getting another email from us. So look out for an email from Ro, where we will invite all of you who have participated to submit one or more poems for our third annual book of poems written during this month in these gatherings. Backing up for a second, in the email that we send today, we'll also make sure you have a link to Manuel's website and how to get a hold of his beautiful books and future offerings. But you're going to get an email about our book. In the email, we'll also write that on August 17th, we will be doing another book launch reading that is hybrid. So you can attend virtually, you can send in a poem, or you can come to Cincinnati into the beautiful Mercantile Library and read with us. We also will remind you that on July 14th here in Cincinnati, as well as special broadcast for our mindful poetry friends who are not able to come, we're bringing Hala Liza to town for a poetry reading and songs from her new collection called Gold. And it is her translations of Rumi. One of the first women, and particularly women who are translating from the original Farsi versus English translations being passed down. So we're really excited to have her here. I think that is it. I think there's no better way for us to end our poetry month is by listening to these beautiful poems again from Manuel. So Manuel, can we hear from you one more time, and then we'll say goodbye.
Manuel, you are muted.
Miracle. Tribute to Gaston Vaquero. Very close to my house is an enormous magnolia tree. Quiet old child from which, at the end of the winter, bloom beautiful piano arpeggios. Ignored for weeks, the melody of the petals ends up falling to the silence of the ground. No one hears the miracle, except the quiet blind woman who lives in that house and who doesn't know if in her yard each spring a magnolia blooms or a piano falls in love. Milagro. Homenaje a Gastón Vaquero. Muy cerca de mi casa hay un enorme magnolio, tranquilo anciano infantil del cual florecen al final del invierno hermosos arpegios de piano. Ignorada por semanas, la melodía de los pétalos termina por caer al silencio del piso. Nadie escucha el milagro, excepto la callada mujer ciega que vive en esa casa y que no sabe si en su patio cada primavera florece una magnolia o se enamora un piano. Gracias.
We'll see you all soon, one way or the other. We'll see you all soon. Thank you so much, everyone.
Goodbye.